All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on Fineprint. Maldives is a small island chain in South Asia. It's known mostly for its pristine beaches and is famous for its very expensive honeymoon suits. But tonight on Fineprint, we'll be taking a look beyond the blue waters and will decode the country's political color. Now, the archipelago is heading for an election in less than 24 hours. And the race has now come down to this. The 61-year-old incumbent Ibrahim Mohammed Saleh and the 45-year-old mayor of the capital city Malé, Mohammed Muizzu. On paper, there are only two contenders. But then there is a geopolitical battle that's also at play here. And this, of course, is between Beijing, which wants to extend its influence, and India. So how did the rivalry between the two Asian giants, in fact, reach this small island nation? Now, the answer lies in geography. Now, this is where Maldives is located. The region is one of the world's most geographically dispersed islands, but their placement makes them significant in the much contested Indian Ocean. New Delhi and Beijing both have their eyes on the nation. Now, each have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into infrastructure projects, which means that election results here could be a key part in deciding the battle for influence in Mali. So let's get to the politics now. President Ibrahim Mohammed Saleh is seeking a re-election. He belongs to the Maldivian Democratic Party. During his time in power, he has firmly turned Maldives into India's orbit of influence. Now, Saleh brought a grant of $250 million from India at a time when the country was struggling. The COVID-19 pandemic had forced border closures and it shut down Maldives' tourism industry, which is the lifeline of its economy. However, many analysts, in fact, criticize Saleh's record on governance. On the other hand is Mohammed Muizzu. He belongs to the main opposition party, the Progressive Party of Maldives. He is currently the mayor of the capital city of Malé. And interestingly, he is unapologetic about his pro-China positioning. Now, in the run-up to the polls, he has even pledged to expel Indian military personnel who are stationed in Maldives. Muizzu has also been championing the India Out campaign, which peddles the narrative that the current government is in fact selling Maldives off to India. If voted to power, Muizzu has said that he would change the geopolitical dynamics of the region. And experts say that it might come at the cost of Maldives' democratic health. So let's come to the most important aspect of this equation, which is, of course, the Maldivian people. So what do the Maldivians have to say about this? The voters are disappointed with both candidates. They do not see much change coming through. So let's in fact explain this through numbers. Now, by the end of 2021, Maldives had owned equal amounts of debt to India and China. At that point of time, it stood at about 26% of the GDP. And by the end of 2022, the national debt spiraled to 113% of the country's GDP. Maldives had its first round of elections on the 9th of September. But both leaders failed to secure the required mandate. Muizzu had secured more than 46% of the votes, while Saleh was a distant runner-up with only about 39.05% of the votes. It remains to be seen if these numbers are going to drastically alter on Saturday, as voters continue to very closely track as to who takes the house in Malé. Miles away in New Delhi and Beijing, they'll also be watching what is unfolding in Malé with great interest. All right, now to give us more insights on this crucial election in the Maldives, we're being joined by Mr. Mimra Abdul Ghafoor, who's joining us live from the Maldivian capital, Malé. He's an international affairs expert and also a political writer. Now, Mr. Ghafoor, let me in fact begin by asking you this. This, of course, is a crucial election, but with the way things are going, it's not just the two candidates who seem to be battling it out, but Beijing is trying to worm its way back in terms of the influence that it had in Mali.
Shall I proceed?
Yes, Mr. Ghafoor, yes.
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me on this show. And thank you for that very comprehensive summary of the geopolitics of our situation. I would actually have to contest the narrative quite a bit. It is true that both candidates, they represent different foreign policy paradigms. Muizzu might be more amenable to Chinese interests, and President Saleh, who might be more amenable to India's interests. But it's important to keep in mind that campaign rhetoric should not be taken at face value. Much of the India Out campaign that is going ahead in the Maldives is essentially aimed at a domestic audience. It is meant to rile up domestic sentiment on the basis that the incumbent government is allowing an Indian military presence on Maldivian soil, and they want to leverage the furor from that into numbers on into essentially winning the election. It's important to keep some context in mind. When Yamin was in power, he maintained an India first foreign policy as well. Muhammad Muizzu, while contesting this election, while he has carried forward with this India Out narrative, he has interestingly said that he will maintain the India first foreign policy. It is very unlikely
Right.
that there will be any drastic changes in foreign policy, even if Muhammad Muizzu gets elected at the outset, for the very simple reason that both candidates will realize once they're in power that India is our largest neighbor. We are dependent on them for imports. We are not really in a position to get involved in a geopolitical chess
Mr.
game
Ghaffur, the
between
reason
Beijing.
why, the entire reason as to why this is being talked about in the context about the elections that are happening in Maldives is because as much as the domestic issues, it appears that the foreign policy issues are being talked about by the local people within Maldives. So give us a sense for people who are watching this from outside of Maldives, why is it that foreign policy becomes such an important factor for elections that are being done in Maldives for the Maldivian people?
Because of the foreign policy ramifications, I wanted to give a bit of context just to highlight that the changes might not be that drastic. However, as I said at the outset, I do believe that a Muhammad Muizzu administration would be more amenable to following in the footsteps of Yamin Abdul Gayoom, the current president's predecessor, who did turn to Beijing for much of Maldives' commercial partnerships. He had signed up for the Belt and Road Initiative. China initiated a number of construction projects in the Maldives, perhaps most saliently the China-Maldives Friendship Bridge. And especially towards the end of his term, there was a lot of India out rhetoric because he did not appreciate India
Right.
pressuring him to release a number of political
Right.
prisoners that he
All right.
had essentially incarcerated. So to put it simplistically, the ramifications of a Muizzu election would be that a political party will come to power that has essentially used the campaign rhetoric of India out and
All right.
removing an Indian military presence from Maldivian soil.
I think this is
And
something that will be
the-
watched very, very closely. We're completely out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Ghaffur, for joining us and getting us those insights there.
Thank you.